The soccer ball sat in a slump of shadow under the coffee table, a little scuffed at the seams and bouncing light in a tired way each time afternoon sun slipped past the curtains. In the corner, the television muttered a show about daredevil cyclists on a neon ramp, then an ad with a cartoon squirrel who could rake in coins with a tap of a finger. Couch sighed as Kian sank deeper into it, thumb flitting across the screen of his phone. Little videos stacked like candies, bright and forgettable. He barely noticed when one ended and the next began. "I never have time to practice," he said, not taking his eyes off the screen. From the kitchen, his father, Arjun, was humming to the sizzle of cumin on a pan. The house smelled like warmth, onion, garlic, something citrusy in the soap froth at the sink. Arjun's humming paused. He didn't say anything else for a moment. Then the stove clicked off. The humming returned, softer, like it was thinking. "You said that yesterday," Arjun called. "And the day before." "It's true," Kian said. His thumb hesitated, then darted again. "There's homework and the bus ride, and I get tired. Then it's dark." Said Arjun. "Give me your eyes for a minute." Kian tilted his head. Across the arm of the couch, a montage of bicycle flips flashed to a slow-motion halt. Felt like the whole world timed its exhale with the TV. He dragged his gaze away and into the kitchen. Arjun had set a large glass jar on the counter. It was the sort that sometimes held pickled mangoes at the market, wide-mouthed, sturdy, the glass warped in places so that it captured the light and made it wobble. Beside the jar were 2 bowls and a small paper bag. In one bowl, big round stones the size of apples, smooth and dark and cool looking even from a distance. In the other, a pile of pebbles and a small cup with sand. Paper bags sagged with weight. Kian blinked. "Are we going to the beach?" "We're going into the day," said Arjun. He wiped his hands on a towel and leaned against the counter, his face thoughtful and kind. "Tell me about your day." "I wake up. Alarm. I hit snooze. I stare at the ceiling." Kian glanced at the jar. "I check a few things. Then I rush to dress, and Mom's yelling about my socks. I miss the good seat on the bus. Cool. Lunch. Everyone talks about that new game." after school, I come home and it's like my head is buzzing. I watch a few clips just to settle. Then homework. By then it's evening. And I just feel done. Arjun said again. He took a marker from his pocket and uncapped it with his teeth. He picked up a rock from the larger bowl and wrote something on it in blocky letters. Then he wrote on another. He hunched, focused, a man defusing a bomb with his calm. "What are you doing?" Kian asked. "Just labeling." Arjun turned the rock so Kian could see. On the first, he'd written soccer practice. On the second, homework. On the third, sleep. The fourth said family time. There were more health, friends, learning. He set those aside and reached for the pebbles, writing smaller this time: chores, commute, pack lunch, tidy room. On the sand cup he wrote in the smallest letters: TV, shorts, mobile games, scroll, random. Kian felt a twitch of heat rise in his cheeks when he saw that last one. Crossed his arms defensively. It's not random. It's just stuff." Arjun nodded without judgment. "Some of it is fun." Fun isn't the enemy of a good life. He tapped the jar with the marker, a gentle clink. "But this is our day. It only holds so much." He tossed a handful of sand into the jar. It hissed as it slid down the inside, skittering like a tiny landslide. He added the pebbles. They rattled into place, finding cracks and corners. The jar looked like a miniature landscape, dunes and gravel. Then Arjun lifted one of the big rocks, soccer practice, and tried to drop it in. Thumped, hit the lip and stuck. He jiggled it, tried to angle it, but the bed of sand and pebbles held firm, refusing to be disturbed. "See," said Arjun. "These big pieces won't fit. Can try to push, but something will break. Usually, it's a promise you make to yourself." Kian swallowed. He looked at the stubborn rock and felt the mirror of it in his chest. The feeling of trying to care but always running out of room. Arjun poured the jar out, sand whispering like a soft rain. "Now," he said, "let's pour in the big rocks first." He placed sleep at the bottom. The jar made a happy thunk, accepting it. Then soccer practice, homework, family time. The big ones nestled together like old friends. He poured the pebbles next, shaking the jar gently so they slipped into spaces between the big round bellies of the rocks. Pile shrank and disappeared into the invisible room the big pieces had created. Finally, he brought the sand. He poured slowly at first, then faster as the grains flowed around everything, filling even the smallest corners. The jar was full, more full than before somehow. It looked like a planet, striations of life. "Do you think it's full?" Arjun asked. Kian peered at the top. He could see a sliver of space between the sand and the lid. "Maybe." Arjun smiled and reached into the paper bag. He pulled out a small bottle of water and unscrewed the cap. He poured. The water soaked into the sand, disappearing, and then it rose like a lake, clear and shimmering. The sand settled, the pebbles glinted. The water climbed to the lip without a spill. In the afternoon light, the jar looked like a tiny world with clouds and rivers. "It's like a little galaxy," Kian breathed. "It is," said Arjun. "The water is surprises, things you cannot plan, a flat tire on your bike, a sudden gust, a burst of rain. Somehow the day can hold more when your big rocks are already in place." Kian touched the glass. It was cool and offered a small seismic tremor through his fingertips. He thought about his mornings. He thought about the soccer ball softened under the table like a sigh. He thought about the tiny silky waterfall of videos that poured through his day, leaving no visible trace, only a sand-like heaviness in him by night. "I want to try," he said. His voice was quieter than he expected. "The big rocks first." Arjun nodded, that calm smile brightening with pride. "Let's choose when to play soccer." He tapped the rock labeled "soccer practice." "First thing in the morning before screens, or first thing after school before any videos." Kian felt a tremor of resistance, a small instinctive panic, like someone had covered a warm light with a shade. Then he thought of the jar again, the way the big rocks made room for everything else afterward. "Morning," he said. "If I wait until after school, I know I'll drift." Arjun's eyebrows arched with approval. Morning it is. We can meet the day while the neighborhood is still stretching. He rinsed the jar and set it in the window, where the last of the sun colored the water like tea. They ate dinner, rice, lentils, cucumber salad, and Kian's mind was unusually quiet. TV was on but muted, a background heartbeat. When his phone buzzed with a new video his friends were laughing about, he felt the tug, then smiled and let it pass. He imagined a rock rolling into place and knew he could watch it later. He went to sleep earlier than usual, and when his alarm scratched the dawn, he sat up before his arm could find the snooze. Outside the neighborhood was a held breath. He dressed in the pale blue of morning, tied the laces of his shoes tight, tugged on his hoodie and padded down the hall. Arjun was at the counter, pouring 2 travel mugs of warm tea. "Good morning," he whispered. There was a delighted hush in his voice that made Kian feel like he'd discovered something rare. They slipped into the world. The sky lifted from darker blue to lighter blue, a curtain rising. The grass at the park licked at Kian's ankles with dew. The soccer field was empty, white lines ghosting the ground. The soccer ball felt eager under his palm, a live thing. His breath puffed in little clouds, then steadied. Birds wrote quick signatures in the air. They started simple. Inside of the foot, outside, a dribble line through 6 cones that were really just flips of old cups from the back of the pantry. The ball, which had felt like an argument lately, became a conversation. The morning made him listen differently. It didn't pull him from one thing to the next. The quiet kept him company, like a friend who wasn't demanding anything. Arjun clapped softly when a sequence looked smooth. He suggested a pause when Kian's cheeks reddened and the breath came sharp and too hot. "We respect our limits," Arjun said. "We grow by nudging them, not by crushing them." They practiced for 30 minutes. When they walked home, the day was waking sprinklers yawning awake with their metallic ssh, a dog's bark burping into the air, someone's toast burning faintly, a car door thumping shut. The rest of the house smelled like coffee and sunlight, and Kian's calves hummed. He was showered and eating warm parathas by the time the bus pulled up. School, when his friends tugged his sleeve to show him a video of a kid balancing on 3 soccer balls at once on his front yard trampoline, Kian laughed and watched, but he didn't feel the itch that made him crave the next and the next. He had already talked to the morning. Day 2 it rained. the sky pressed low, a gray thumb smudging the world neat. Kian yelped when he tugged the front door and the wind blew back at him, sheeted with water. "No practice," he said with relief, so quick he startled himself. "Garage," Arjun said, tapping his wrist like a conductor calling for attention. "Rain is water in the jar." We still place the rock. The garage smelled like oil and cardboard and pine. They chalked a small rectangle on the concrete wall for aim and used empty soda cans as cones. The ball thumped in the close space, a different voice. When Kian struck the rectangle dead center for the first time, there was a satisfaction that leaped up behind his ribs. A warm burst like sunlight found a gap in the clouds. By the end, his hair was damp and his cheeks were ruddy, and outside the rain had softened to a mist. The street looked rinsed clean, like a photograph laid out to dry. Daytary. His calf muscles ached. He worried that this was a sign that he should rest, then remembered Arjun's words: respect limits, nudge them. He stretched longer, moving carefully. "We'll keep it light," Arjun promised. Technique, not speed. They worked on trapping the ball gently, letting it kiss into his instep and stop. Each correct trap was like pressing a switch in him that lit up just enough to keep him going. In the afternoons, when his homework hummed and the bus ride slammed sleep into his eyelids, the familiar pull of the screen still tickled at his hand. Sometimes he gave in, watched something silly, laughed, and let it go. Other days he didn't feel that same hunger. He had already eaten the morning. A strange thing began to happen. There was still space at the end of the night. He found himself sitting on the couch with his parents, a bowl of popcorn between them, watching a movie that moved slow and kind as it unfolded. The jar held it all because the rocks were already in place. On the fifth morning, an old man in a navy cardigan appeared at the fence of the park. He stood with his hands folded on the top slat, watching with a small, contained smile, like someone reading a familiar poem. When Kian tried a new move and failed spectacularly, tripping over his own feet and nearly measuring the grass with his face, the old man chuckled, not unkindly. "Forgive my eyes," he called. They grew curious. He stepped through the little gate, which stuttered on rusty hinges. Close, his cardigan was pilled at the seams, and his white hair bristled like soft seaweed. "You love the game." "I'm learning to," Kian said honestly. "Some days." The man nodded. Some days, he repeated. My name is Costa. These legs once knew a pitch better than a prayer. He lifted his trousers a bit and mimed a kick. The move was crisp in the air, the language of it unmistakable. Arjun's eyebrows rose. You played, he said. Goaltender. Semi-pro in the old country. A small team, big heart. Costa winked at Kian. You're generous with power, little friend. Be generous with stillness too. Kian looked down at his feet. The ball waited, patient. Stillness. The foot that plants, Costa said. He tapped his right shoe against the grass. The humble foot, forgotten because it never meets the ball. Aim with your plant foot. The strike will follow. Always face where you want to go. He positioned Kian, showing him where to lay his weight, how the hips whisper a direction before the foot shouts it. They tried it slowly. The ball obeyed like a dog relieved to have been asked politely, finally, instead of chased. When Kian hit the painted corner of their chalk rectangle 2 out of 3 times, he grinned so hard his cheeks hurt. Costa clapped once, delighted. There you are, he said. He found a little leather keychain in his pocket, a tiny soccer ball worn smooth where a thumb had rubbed it for years. For luck, he said, pressing it into Kian's palm. Luck is a cousin of habit. You make room, it visits. We're learning about jars, Kian told him and explained the big rocks. Costa laughed, a soft cough of sound. Ah, yes. I learned it too late. But still I learned. Something uncurled inside Kian as he heard that, a ribbon of gratitude to live in a house where lessons had a kitchen smell, where a jar could be a teacher. When they waved Costa goodbye, the old man's cardigan flapped like a small blue flag, and the day felt like it had raised another little sun. Tryouts were in 2 weeks. The date lived in Kian's head like a round moon, looking down on him whichever way he turned. He wanted to tell the moon he was ready. Some mornings he was. Others he felt like he had to introduce himself all over again to the field, to his own feet. On the 8th day he woke cranky. His dream had been a long, fretful run through a hallway where doors slammed just as he reached them. He stumbled into the kitchen to find Arjun blinking sleep from his eyes and the jar in the window gone. "Where's the—" Kian started. Arjun pointed. The jar was on the table, cleaned and dry, with a line of rocks beside it. Kian ran his fingers over soccer practice, over sleep, over family time. He realized his hand lingered on each, like greeting old friends. "Big rocks," he said, more to himself than anyone else. He practiced. Not very well. The ball misbehaved and the ground felt tilted. He fell twice and could hear his own embarrassment like a crowd behind a wall. He wanted to quit halfway through and say something like, "This is dumb," but the words tasted like vinegar before he got them out. Arjun suggested a break. They sat on the grass while the sky burned off a rag of cloud and a slice of sunlight crept onto Arjun's shoulder. "We can call it a day," Arjun said. "No," Kian said, surprising himself. "This is the rock. The rock is heavy, that's why it matters. I want to place it." "Then we place it," Arjun said, and smiled with something like awe in his eyes. By the 10th morning, a rhythm had woven itself around them. Rituals made the day feel like it had a door they knew how to open. Wake to the quiet. Practice. Let the mess of the world pill. Knowing there was room for it because what needed anchoring was anchored. Kian adjusted his sleep, went to bed a little earlier, learned to care about the light in the evening and what it did to his eyelids. Sometimes his friends texted at midnight, "Are you awake?" This new level is insane. He felt a footstep inside him that used to rush to answer and watched it keep walking. "Tomorrow," he typed back once, and the word felt like a promise rather than a procrastination. There were tiny wonders. A morning when fog lay low across the field, and Kian's feet vanished below shins like he was running on a cloud. A hawk that hung above them on a thread of silence for a full minute, its shadow a calm scissor on the grass. A stray dog who trotted by, accepted a scratch behind the ears, and then loped into the day like he had a schedule to keep. Each surprise felt like the water poured into the jar, filling spaces they hadn't even known existed. Not all the surprises were beautiful. One evening, Kian twisted his ankle coming down the last step on the back porch. Pain sprang like a seismic wave, bright and rude. He sat on the stairs biting his lip, tears prickling because pain felt personal and unfair in a child's way even when you were trying to be brave. Arjun knelt and checked the swelling, which realized it was needed and swelled more. Ice, he said. We rest. Sleep is a rock too. The next morning, the field looked like a place he couldn't visit, a friend's house when you're grounded. He wrapped the ankle and did balance drills instead, standing on one foot, engaging muscles that didn't like to be noticed. He traced passes with his eyes and moved the ball with the gentlest tap. The ankle taught him about patience, which is a kind of strength few remember to praise. By the following day, the swelling had calmed. He walked with care. The jar will be here tomorrow too, Arjun said. That is the magic people forget. The day returns. You don't have to pour your entire life into one sunrise. A week slid by, and a Thursday morning held a surprise shaped like a story. They were cooling down on the bench near the swings when Arjun looked at the sky as if he were reading a clock that only he could see. I never told you this, he said. When I was your age, I wanted to be a keeper. Like Costa. I could slide so fast I thought I could steal the ball from a bullet. But my uncle's shop needed hands at 4 o'clock, and our bus was late, and I didn't know then about rocks. I poured my day full of sand because even worry is a kind of sand if you let it take over. The big things never found room. I loved soccer, I did. But I loved duty more, and it was the right love then. Till I sometimes think about those mornings I could have had. He said it without regret smearing his voice. It was a watchful kind of memory, tender to the boy he had been and honest to the man he was. Kian listened without pity. He felt a strange feeling that what his father had learned, he had placed in his hand like a stone, smooth and useful. You're giving me time, Kian said quietly. I'm giving you a jar, Arjun said and touched Kian's shoulder. You choose. I'm just here to remind you that you can choose. Tryouts arrived like a drumbeat you've been hearing in the distance without really knowing how close it is until it's at your feet. The field was busy with voices and nervous laughter. Coach, a woman with a kind but unsmiling face, tossed pennies, those flimsy mesh vests that turned kids into teams, into the air and called names. Kian's stomach felt hollow and packed at the same time, like when you fill a suitcase too neatly and suspect it will all explode the minute a zipper shifts. They started with laps, then passing exercises, then small-sided games. Kian saw his classmates in a new light. Not just kids in desks and cafeteria lines, but bodies that understood angles and speed. He liked that. It made him want to be better, not resent them. In the first small game, he miscontrolled a pass and let it slip under his foot. His ears went hot. Then he remembered Costa's voice, the humble foot that plants. He slowed down, placed his left foot with care, and the ball began to obey. It was not magic. It was attention, which is its own miracle. Midway through the tryout, a boy on Kian's team, taller and older by 6 months, twisted his knee in a tangle of sprinting legs. He went down with a sound that made everyone's faces go still. Coach knelt, examined, called for water. The boy tried to stand, shook his head, and limped to the side with a cloud around him that was part pain and part fear. When the play resumed, the coach looked apologetic but determined. "Next," she called, glancing at her clipboard. "We need a penalty taker." The field changed in Kian's mind. A square of pressure, a lens that made everything sharp and shaky at once. He had taken penalties in the park. He had hit the chalk rectangle in the garage. But this was a set of strangers, a clipboard, a line of kids watching with their mouths half open, measuring. Arjun stood at the fence, not yelling, not telling him to relax. Just present, his hands in his pockets lick. His own nerves might fly away if not anchored. He caught Kian's eye and lifted his chin slightly toward the goal. In that small gesture was an entire sentence: plant your foot. Put your rock down. Kian paced backward, set the ball on the spot, and looked at the net. The keeper was tall, his hair sticking up like grass after you sweep your palm across it. Coaches stood still. The air felt thick as syrup. "You can scroll right now and not feel this," a voice in him whispered slyly. "You could be elsewhere. You could be safe." But that was sand speaking. It always promised you comfort first and took more than it gave. He placed his left foot beside the ball, felt the sweet flat of the earth under his shoe. He pointed his toes where he wanted the ball to go, a fraction inside the left post, danger close, where a keeper would feel silly for overcommitting and slower for guessing wrong. He breathed. He swung. Contact was not a thunderclap, it was a clean conversation. The ball spun low and fast. The keeper dove, long and valiant, but the ball kissed the inside of the post and tucked itself into the net like a cat turning a corner into a warm room. For a second, silence. Then a sound that wasn't quite a cheer but was the beginning of one, the release of breath he hadn't known the field was holding. Kian didn't jump or punch the air. He stood with his lips pressed into an astonished "oh," and then he smiled. He looked to the fence, where Arjun had both his hands over his chest, as if steadying something bright that had leaped there. Costa was there too, perched on his cardigan's pocket like a bird on a ledge, eyes moist. They scrimmaged again. Kian made mistakes, made corrections, made space. When he was subbed, he drank water like it had become the most delicious thing in the world. He thought he could see the jar in the coach's hands when she wrote on the clipboard, a glass circle catching sunlight from every angle. A week later, the list went up. Paper on a bulletin board at eye level, names typed neat as seeds in rows. Bodies leaned in, whispers frothed. Someone made a confident sound that was almost rude. Kian found his name and closed his eyes to make sure he could still hear it with his ears. He could. He opened them and the letters were still there. He didn't run. He didn't crow. He stepped back, letting someone else lean in, and felt something in his chest that was both small and huge. The satisfaction of a rock that had been placed, a jar that had accepted it, a day that had made room. He turned and saw Arjun standing with an expression of pleasure that was more than pride and less than surprise. The particular joy of a plan that had worked because it was never really about the plan. It was about the choosing. They walked home in the late sun, past the bakery that sweated sugar into the air, past Mrs. Shaw's cats who had no respect for private property, their tails question marks of privilege. Costa called congratulations from his porch, raising a glass of something dark and fizzy. The jar on the kitchen counter had been washed again and looked like it had grown a soul. Arjun set the rocks back in. That night, Kian watched a movie with his parents, the kind of story that moved like a river, not a slideshow. He laughed at something silly and didn't feel guilty. He went to bed at a good hour. The next morning the alarm sang and he woke, and you could tell that the day had already started to shape itself around him like a shirt that finally fit. Time did not stop being surprising. There were rough practices, homework avalanches, days when the air felt like it was made of wet wool. There was a game where he put his plant foot wrong and sent the ball into the stratosphere, and for a second he wondered if anything had been learned at all. There were friends who sometimes begged him to play that game with the cartoon squirrel, and sometimes he did, and sometimes he let their impatience wash past him like river water. Later, he would say, and mean it, because later had a space where guilt didn't grow weeds. The wonder didn't vanish because of routine, it was framed by it. One evening, when spring had loosened the stiff edges from the trees, the whole family went down to the river. The water was high and curious, tugging at reeds, testing stones. Arjun hopped into the shallows in sandals and picked up a rock, flat and oval and warm as bread. He held it up with a grin. "A new big rock?" Kian asked. "Maybe," Arjun said. He turned the stone in his hand like he was reading its secret interior. "We can name it together." They named it Kindness. It went into the jar beside sleep and soccer and family time. The jar was getting crowded, but it made Kian oddly happy. There were trickles of space still around everything, ready for whatever water would come. That night, after dishes, Kian took the jar in his hands and was surprised again at the heft. He knew it was just glass and stones, pebbles, sand, a little water. But it felt heavier. He wondered if a jar could carry a story. He set it down and watched it in the lamplight. It looked like a promise you could keep on a windowsill. The season began. Kia and played some minutes here, sat out others. He learned to cheer in a way that didn't sound like he was practicing his own disappointment, but like he really wanted the sound to help someone else's feet find their courage. Coach put him at left mid. It suited him, the hustle and the view, the way he could see the whole field as a moving idea. He had a week where everything clicked, and a week where he couldn't have trapped a beach ball inside a bouncy castle. Through it all, the mornings kept coming, quiet as breath and faithful as bread. When a final came, the kind with medals and a banner someone's parent had crammed into the back of a van, the air was thick with the particular sweetness of nerves. Your body knows when you're taking a test, whether it's on paper or grass. The other team wore bright yellow. They were fast and a little cocky, but not ugly about it. When Kian's teammate sank a pass like a thread through a needle and Kian was there at the end of it, the goal opening just enough, he placed his foot and sent the ball low and clean into the corner. He knew as soon as it left his laces that it was going to behave. He didn't scream. He let the smile break him open and then put himself back together fast to run back for the reset. He felt a hand on his shoulder in his mind, not physically, and he knew whose hand it would be if it were Arjun's, steady, a warm stone. After the metal clinked against his chest and the team photos were snapped and the cooler was empty of everything but ice and a single lemon slice, they walked home. The light looked like honey someone had spilled across the street. The jar on the windowsill was full, not just because of rocks, but because of something else Kian couldn't name, and maybe that was the point. That night, he sat on the couch and watched a few silly videos. He laughed freely. He did his homework. He texted GG to a friend with a string of confetti emojis. He set his alarm. He placed his cleats by the door like a tiny altar. He padded into the kitchen, rinsed a glass, drank water that was colder than he expected, which made him shake his head and grin at no one. "Dad," he said into the dim. Arjun was at the table, papers fanned around him like a collapsed bird. He looked up. "I think I know what the jar really is," Kian said. "It's not time. It's me. It's my attention." Arjun sat back impressed. "Your attention," he repeated. "Yes. That's the rarest thing we own and the thing the world trades in." Kian touched the jar. His fingertips left tiny crescents on the glass. "I want to spend it well." Arjun's smile was both proud and relieved, as if Kian had remembered to bring home something precious from the market. "So do I," he said. "Every day I start again." Bedtime, the house did that quieting trick houses do, settling into its wooden bones, sighs in the walls like old songs. Kian lay on his pillow and watched a rectangle of streetlight climb the wall and slowly slide to the ceiling as a car passed outside. He thought of the jar. He thought of morning. He thought of the wonder he would find if he kept looking at the world like it was telling him something true. He slept and dreamed an honest dream, no locked doors, no long hallways. His feet were sure and the ball was kind. The field had a sky the color of beginning. The next morning, the alarm sang a song he already knew. He woke not because the noise insisted, but because something inside him had already stood. He drank his tea half in the kitchen, half in the soft light of the doorway. He stepped into the day. He placed his rock. And that was how it went most days. Not perfect, just steady. The jar held whatever joy they poured into it because the big stones held, making room. On the days when sand blew in faster, when the world threw glitter across the floor to distract him, he smiled, swept it to the side, and found his rocks again, right where he'd left them. Moral of the story: life will always offer you sand first, little easy distractions that look harmless but fill your day before you've noticed. Choose your big rocks on purpose and place them first. Practice, rest, family, what truly matters to you. When you honor those first, everything else can settle around them and there is still room for joy. Discipline in choosing becomes the freedom to enjoy the small things without regret.